Issue 278. We start out with Sonic and Shamar, with him and Antoine fighting Badniks for padding. Wasn't it enough that the Cool Edge started out with them in a fight and we had no indication of how long they've been there? Now it's happening again. So I start out attached and confused. You'd feel more immersed if you saw, like, every part of it. Even if it's, like, reduced to one panel, sometimes. Gee, do you think they'll lose? Antoine grabs a part of a robotic tail with a spike ball at the end of it, and then the next panel we hear a clonk sound effect, and the tail is now in front of Antoine in the air. So that's representing him throwing the tail of the Scorpion Badnik, but it wasn't represented well. We didn't see him get ready to throw it first. Then Big's holding something over his head and thanks him, making the same mistake he did already, and it was corrected back then too. Then a giant robot shows up from the ground, and Antoine turns away from it to warn Sonic about the Horde Commander, during which he could have been attacked by it. Sonic says he's got his hands full, because his hands are being held still by a worthless mook. That's a pun. So someone I don't recognize says he's got him covered. At least this design doesn't seem so bad. But I'm wondering how in the world someone as fast as Sonic had his hands grabbed and held still in the first place. Wouldn't he have attacked them before that? It's not like it's Mecha Sally and he's holding back. So is that the new guy, Temple Guardian? I'm glad it's a Mobian instead of a human. Then someone attacks the Horde Commander while spinning, and a horrible looking green character karate chops the mook occupying Sonic. Sonic doesn't recognize these people, but the locals call them the Freedom Fighters according to them. Can the story end already? I'm supposed to take this green character completely seriously now? There's a reason I'm not calling her by her species name. She looks like a shitty Deviant OC that's only green to try to look special. I have no idea what species she's meant to represent, so she fails. Sonic looks kind of like a hedgehog, Tails looks just like a fox, Rotor looks like an actual walrus, Bunny looks like an actual bunny. It's not that hard. There's a reason all those main characters were successful. You don't need them to be special colors. Sonic is only the exception because he's supposed to match the Sega logo's color. And Shadow's black and red because it looks cool. And Silver's an albino, so that's easily justifiable. And it's so easy to tell that a character is supposed to be a hedgehog. So it's kind of fine to have them be whatever color you want, but not other animals. At least Fleetway's background characters tried to look like a specific recognizable species, like skunks or dogs. So I was fine with there being a skunk who used to fight Eggman. Then it turns out someone was drilling through the ground, and the purple guy jumps through it with his fists up, as I still don't know what species he's supposed to be. I don't know, walrus? So the worthless mooks decide to retreat, and he satisfyingly calls these OCs imitators. And when he says his name is Sonic, he gets recognized and respected. So, even though they all knew his name and modeled their team after his, they all didn't recognize him on sight. Why are these awful looking characters being taken seriously? When I want creativity in a game adaptation, I don't want new characters, I want new settings. Or much more interesting versions of the game settings, at least. Well, at least they're competent. They're not trying too hard to be wacky and silly. But still, I want them out of the story immediately. They're embarrassing the comic with the way they look. I can tell it's by a fanfiction writer. Instead, I guess they'll ruin the story by staying with the heroes the whole time and just slowing Sonic down. There's a reason I always imagined that Sonic would be alone when going to visit every Gaia Guardian. It's faster. And I guess the reason he's being slowed down by his friends is because they're backup in case he runs into bad guys to fight on the way. Because God forbid he just run past them on the way to the town where he can ask everyone if they're the Guardian while holding Gregorius' list up so they know they can tell him the truth. He should have gotten all this done by now. Antoine complains about Sonic as if his ego needs to get any bigger. This is why I hate Reboot Sonic. Maybe there's just too much focus on this. If the writer knows to lampshade this problem, why does he still think Sonic is sympathetic at this point? I picture him as Boom Sonic and I see no difference right now. That's why I'm so glad that he had that werehog problem, because at least it gave him a sympathetic human side for once where he was struggling with something. being ashamed. But that's gone now. It seems like being smug is the only character. And the text boxes try to tell me that one of them's a porcupine, one of them's a finnick, and one of them is a mole. But it doesn't make me feel better because they don't look like them. It's not even doing it right. The text boxes should say their names and then their species. I would have the species in brackets so I don't want to notice them at first. Archie had a porcupine character that looked like a porcupine. Dylan. What is the point of claiming that your characters are based on these animals if they clearly don't bear even a passing resemblance to them? There's a reason I thought he was a walrus at first. He looks more like Rotor. The character designer is so hacky that he doesn't even know he has to make a mole brown or yellow. They're not just as important as Sonic and Knuckles, so don't color them like that. I get the feeling that absolutely nobody is going to remember these characters. At least not a couple decades from now. They're just gonna blend into a mass of the DeviantArt OCs in the comic. Especially so if they're only for 2 stories. The bottom line is, while I prefer seeing Mobius to boring humans in theory, at this point even humans would look way better. They look professional, not distracting. He didn't need to write it so that Sonic of all people needed rescuing by these new characters, which made it look like he liked the new characters too much. All they did was waste their time. They'll probably keep doing so. They don't even seem to have personalities, more importantly. They're just freedom fighters. How are they better than the Saudi M characters who don't look immediately off-putting? We see Sonic Antoine OC ask where the Gaia Guardian is, calling him by name, and they don't know, which is realistic. What's not realistic is that we aren't shown they went to the person's address. The list showed locations, didn't it? Wouldn't that naturally include a home address? I guess we're supposed to assume that's the first place they went and he wasn't there. Antoine's told that Asin is a lazy fool who better show up because the minute the army clears out of that temple, they're going back to work. Sonic complains that Professor Pickle's into the guy's stuff, so he should know the guy. Yeah, he should know all of them. Way to point out a huge plot hole stretching the arc out. He could have had a list of all of them. We didn't need to wait until Gregorius decided to give them one. Sonic reveals out of nowhere that the professor's office is in Shamar. In the game, his office started out somewhere else and then he moved to Shamar for no reason. It's weird that he has 2 offices. Like, it just seems unrealistic. The green guy says that this is why you hire a spy, and explains that the Egg Army's kidnapped him, and are using him to repair an old temple that the Freedom Fighters busted up during a fight. Why in the world would Eggman and his army want to repair the temple? Again, Eggman's whole goal is to make sure the world would stay shattered. He'd want to do the opposite of repair the temples. He wouldn't need the Gaia Colossus because he could just make a mecha himself, which would be way easier. This just calls attention to the fact that Eggman's made an idiot just to force the heroes to have a chance. Wait, what? How'd it get to night? It was just daytime and Sonic was gonna run straight to where he needed to go. I guess all the other redundant heroes slowed him down so that he had to merely walk when he could have just ran there, dragging them all behind him. So suddenly he's the werehog and this needs to be explained to them. And somehow they never screamed or anything, and were smart enough to immediately get that he's supposed to be Sonic because he's with Chip, and talks like Sonic. Kind of a subdued reaction to his werehog form. And Big and Antoine have a really annoying, painfully unfunny dynamic. Antoine wouldn't be acting anything like this, and him being annoyed with him just makes it worse. Is this seriously the only reason Antoine's here? At least Big is being useful by simplifying the exposition around Sonic and Unleashed and summarizing it really well. Even he can do that. So Antoine should be thankful. He should know they don't have time for a long story. It's good of Big to apologize for annoying him. But I really don't want Antoine here if he's going to be portrayed like this. Sonic doesn't know how Sally has the patience for leadership and tells them to split into teams. Now I'm just wondering why Sonic can't do all of this himself, much faster, without being the werehog, because it wouldn't be night. He could wait until day. It didn't have to become night. These are not characters I can take seriously. Oh, the reason the mole said that someone will have to describe Sonic's new form to him later is probably that he's blind. Like an actual mole. That's a bit interesting. And yet they still don't make him look like a mole. So from my point of view, he's just a purple guy who's blind for no reason and has Knuckles' drilling ability for no reason. They could have just used Knuckles. I wonder how many people actually remember which species these characters are supposed to be past the first panel, because why would you? Sonic says that he'll take the high road and sneak in from above. That sounds like the name for a bat. They should have just called her a bat. I read the name of her species and I just thought of Fennekin. Isn't that a fox Pokemon? Spike will lead around Antoine to get past the guards. Sonar will watch their backs, and if anyone finds her, she can sick big at them. She shushes Chip and tells him to hold up, implying that she can hear something they can't. And she tells Big to go check it out when she was the one who heard it. I have a question. Why is she the only one around here with great hearing when Big's ears are much bigger than hers? Or maybe she heard something they didn't for no reason. Like Amy hearing the mystic melody over Rotor's arguing. It turns out Big's looking for dark eye monsters, because I should have known they'd pad out the story with this tensionless action scene. Just when I was finding the story interesting, because they're going on a mission with a plan involving a lot of people. They all die in one hit, which is at least better pacing than tons of hits. But the point is that their sheer numbers just pad things out with fights the heroes always win. I guess that's why I only like seeing the Titans. They're an actual challenge, and there's just one of them each. I'm so bored, I just want the story to be over. If it didn't have to turn night, Sonic could have easily rescued that guard really quickly. I was given no indication it was close to night earlier, so it suddenly turning to night just to slow down the pacing just seems unfair. So the so-called mole says to Antoine that footprints in the dirt that are shallow and old means that the Egg Army has found this tunnel. So they all decide to split up and scout ahead a bit. This means they wouldn't have each other's backs if they were ambushed. Antoine goes through the dark nervously and then screams, "My eyes," because suddenly it lights up thanks to a bunch of robots surrounding him. And some of the bad guys have fire, so swinging the sword at it would probably burn him from convection. So he has to avoid that. Still, I'm sure he'll be fine. Sonic says that his stretchy arms are fun to swing around on and makes sneaking around too easy. I didn't see him swing around in anything. All of a sudden, he gets spotted by a spotlight and surrounded by badniks. Ooh, robots that die in one hit. How scary. Right away, I hoped that the spotlight shining on Sonic would turn him back into Sonic, like the light beams in the Wii version of Unleashed. Also, the person greeting him knows he's called a werehog in particular because he's the regional sub-boss, who looks stunningly ugly and horrible right away. I don't know how anyone approved that character design. How did anyone approve most of the bad character designs? Rouge looks like a white bat. That's why she looks so much better than her. What does this awful green cyborg in the next story look like? I don't know, some kind of vague animal person shape? There's a reason the game characters don't look like that. Maybe they should have hired the game's marketing team or character designers instead. I really don't want to read this story because I know it's going to make Bunny look like a bitch. I remember hearing about a Reboot story where Bunny met a cyborg who's realistically happy about it while she whines and bitches about her cyborgism. Even though it's the best thing about her. I always imagined the cyborg she met to be pretty. Like a long-haired brunette who's used to having it easy. But the Reboot's so shit that not even that standard was met. Believing that a character is going to look good is kind of a really basic, low expectation. So Bunny looks like a complete idiot bitching about her cyborg parts because never mind that they make her a useful, badass, and unique. Never mind how many of her accomplishments she owes to it. They make her look different. Superficial dits. Real life has artificial limbs. And people have fake, convincing-looking skin on them. So why doesn't Bunny just do that? If she really cared that much about how they looked, why doesn't she tell Rotor to do that? Or at least paint them to look like normal legs and arms? Why doesn't she always wear long-sleeved clothes and pants? I guess she doesn't really care that much. So maybe that's why I end up feeling like her angst about this was forced. It comes off like an afterthought, because oh, she cares so much about looking weird, but then why doesn't she do anything about it? Sure, she didn't ask for this, but she'd actually look smart and brilliant if she had asked for this. She could ask for it so she could be a better freedom fighter. I've got all these insults with Bunny, and as for the green cyborg, there's nothing. He's right. Being a cyborg is cool. And he needs treatment, so he doesn't have a choice anyways. We're supposed to find the hero sympathetic and side with them. And Bunny's not supposed to be an anti-hero. Usually she's so bare of personality that the only standout trait she ever seemed to have was idiot. And this is a prime example instead of the reboot actually improving things, when it's a different continuity. So a truly brilliant writer would have changed things, made her happy about being a cyborg. Especially since she was supposed to learn to appreciate it after she lost her cybernetics and had to get them back in the preboot. But the reboot completely undid that character development that he thought to make her have in the first place. I really don't care enough to focus on the story. I already heard about it. The plots in the reboot are so basic that just hearing about them is enough sometimes. And the green guy is too hard on my eyes for me to want to look at him. Maybe don't have so much green and barely any black to contrast it. Maybe don't have his eyes look like this. I was kind of looking forward to seeing the story for myself, but knowing that the cyborg she meets looks like this, combined with the fact that she happily works for Eggman, I don't really care anymore. You know, that's what really disgusts me. Who is she to lecture someone on whether they're allowed to be happy they're a cyborg? They're not her. What kind of hero wouldn't want someone to be happy? She has to shove her angst onto them too? That's no fun. Wouldn't she just be like, good for you? It's like how she was mad at Boomer for becoming a cyborg and said, you'd willingly give up being all natural? Like, fuck you. He clearly made a smart decision. Hell, Rotor should do that. It'd take advantage of him being an engineering genius better. That's why Rick made himself a cyborg. Even if only on the inside. Maybe I'd be happier with Rotor's new design if he was kind of a cyborg. I guess there's nothing to really miss with that subplot. Bunny fights a cyborg she hates because she's apparently a self-hating cyborg, as you'd expect of a dumb blonde. It'd be fine if she was just yelling at Cassia because, oh, you're working for Eggman and you shouldn't be happy about it. You'd think all the freedom fighters would know that the cyborgs are forced to work for Eggman. Anyways, Sally gets greeted, respectfully, by the person in charge of the Egg Army stationed here. This horrible-looking character doesn't know about the Emerald, as Nicole insists. How would she know that, though? Why is she greeting her as Princess if she's just another mook who loves Eggman for no reason, which completely offsets the good in him having variety in what kinds of things work for him? Does she not love Eggman? She tells Sally that if the heroes take control of the temple, Eggman would just order her to take it back, leading to more fighting, and there'd be no end to it. Sally asks why she just backed down when the planet's at stake. In one ear and out the other. She really did make things seem hopeless. Doesn't anyone realize that all the hero should have to do is put an emerald in the temple pedestal briefly, and then leave while carrying it? If it had to be kept in the temple in the game for the entire game, that's arbitrary. It's not like the emeralds have to be kept in all the Gaia temples for the rest of time, or else removing them will reshatter the planet. So they don't have to stay there to keep the planet's continent back where it should be. If that was the case, then it would make reforming the world even harder, because how likely would it be that somebody would go and steal the emerald from the pedestal? Everyone would know that it's in the pedestal because it has to be kept there to keep the continent back in its rightful place. So there would be absolutely no chance of the world being put back together unless someone somehow has the means to put all the emeralds in all the temples at once, which wouldn't have been possible in ancient times, when the temples were built. The silhouetted person says that the way Sally snuck into the grounds reminded her of her previous escapade at the mine, and because of this, she strikes her as a smart, compassionate person who would look for a third option when faced with a bad choice. How'd she know she was compassionate? Sally lampshades that she's presuming a lot about her. She says that the person came here on her own, not knowing if Sally would just take her prisoner. And the woman says that if she made a mistake, she deserved the consequences, but she hoped a freedom fighter would be willing to hear one of Eggman's mooks out. Sally then tells her that they'll leave the temple alone. And she's not suspicious because she thinks she convinced her with a smart, logical argument when really the temple's just a decoy. Man, that character design is embarrassing. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if it was explained that characters like this were aliens. You'd only expect characters to look like this in two continuities, the Reboot and IDW, both of which are written by a fanfiction writer. Big surprise there. Who else would think these designs look good? Oh good, she is smart enough to say that she didn't expect Sally to agree to this so readily. And like she said, the planet's at stake. So she guesses that this isn't the Gaia Temple, which scares her, immediately proving her guess right. But then she walks away and says that maybe she doesn't know any better. So she decides to return to her post. This kind of moment earns respect from me, at least for her personality. Sally's surprised that even though she works for Eggman, she's gonna sit back and play ignorant. Is this really the first time she's ever met anyone like this? And then she says that maybe she can help her. She just says that by not involving her people in more fighting, she is helping. This is interesting. I just wish this bad-looking character fully explained herself instead of leaving right now. She should be saying that, oh, I don't know, cybernetics and her brother are rigged to explode if she leaves Eggman. And maybe they have tracking devices in them, so Sally has no way of freeing them from him. You'd think she'd know that Sally knows Rotor, and if Rotor is so great, he would obviously be able to cure her sister. Like, he'd be able to do treatment just fine. You'd think he'd just be able to order it from the Mobotropolis Hospital, I don't know. You'd think he'd be able to fix the problem in the cybernetics that has a betraying Eggman punishment in it. You'd think that'd be an obvious assumption since Rotor exists. But no, that doesn't occur to her. I guess she really doesn't know Rotor exists. Wouldn't all the heroes know about the fact that cyborgs who leave Eggman get punished? If this is done to every Legionnaire, and Bunny was with them as a double agent? Sally should be saying that Rotor and Nicole could help her by disabling the explosives and tracking devices in their cybernetics, or something. And by helping them get legitimate jobs where Eggman won't know to look for them. Instead, she just immediately gives up and lets her leave. That was dumb of her. She's really compassionate. So basically what's happening with Bunny is that she keeps fighting the cyborg and they fall into a cave and then they walk their way out. And whine, angst, Bunny doesn't appreciate how badass she is. I still refuse to believe that her having to learn to walk all over again made sense when there were super strength robot legs that if anything would have a much easier time with everything. But I already talked about that. So I don't want to talk about the story. There's nothing new to say. At least they've stopped being... Never mind. The story ends and the hideous cyborg is holding an emerald. And they actually dare to drag the story out for another issue. I feel like the heroes getting this emerald is wasted as a story because they only got it in a story like this crap. I was already told about what the plot of the story was and how they're interacting years ago by video. So I already know the whole plot and the dialogue just pisses me off. So there's nothing for me to say about it that I haven't already said. The first story by Flynn is about Sonic going to Shamar to rescue the Gaia Temple Guardian who was kidnapped by Eggman so he could repair a temple for no reason. He couldn't have been made to do anything else, like build a statue of Eggman. And sadly, rather than the originality being in anything but characters, a bunch of our time gets wasted because horrible looking characters with no personalities team up with Sonic out of nowhere for the sake of helping him. I really don't see why. Sonic could beat any enemy that he has to deal with. Why does he need a lookout? He got spotted anyways. So that story sucked because it was just an eyesore. What species are these characters just by appearance alone? Why are they the wrong colors? I don't care about any of these characters. Even Sonic and Antoine piss me off here. It's sad when Big the Cat and Chip are the only good, nice, harmless characters in a story. It's sad when they could have been just like the game and been a less frustrating experience. And the second story, by Ala Baker, is not worth reading at all because the main bad guys are a complete eyesore to look at. Well, the part where Sally's being talked to by Clove is kinda good because she's acting like a realistic person. Intentionally deciding to play ignorant to the fact that she's guarding a fake temple because she doesn't want her people involved in any more fighting because of the heroes in Eggman. She's smart. But her horrible design is too distracting for me to take the story seriously. Speaking of that, the cyborg Bunny demonizes in the story is so unspeakably awful to look at that I can't stand the story. There's no creativity or charm in the plot to impress me enough to make the art worth looking at. Because I've already seen a Sonic character fight an organic mook of Eggman's. She's just fighting a bad guy here. And I've already seen Sonic fall down into a cave from a floor crumbling in Sonic Super Special 15. At least in issue 224, the characters weren't all horrendous looking. I could forgive bad character design Other M because it was just an early fan comic, so he was lucky he even got anyone to draw it at all. And the stories were interesting enough to be worth it. Here, Bunny hates the shit out of what's possibly the second worst looking Sonic character ever, after Dimitri in his robot form. But not because of that. She just doesn't respect that he's someone who's actually happy with being an awesome cyborg who doesn't have to worry about taking care of as much skin. So he naturally assumes Bunny should be the same way. How is she not happy about having super strength arms and extendable legs? It's frustrating that my words are being put in the cyborg's mouth. Why is this character the only one who's representing the correct argument from the audience? Why is the audience's thoughts being represented by him? She's just ungrateful. This is like if Superman had tons of angst because he can fly and has a costume, and that makes him different. Basically what happens is, they fight and fall into a cave, and then Bunny gets led to the Emerald, because of course it's been held prisoner by Eggman mooks, instead of actually being held by the locals. Which would have made a much better story to experience than this horrible looking eyesore of a story. It's not a nitpick because character designers need to consider how the audience will feel about how their designs look. And if they don't, and they just draw whatever they want, an awful design can ruin the enjoyment of the story for most people. And the character designer doesn't want that, does he? At that point, he's failed. That's the worst possible job he could do. It's really sad because when I imagined the story for myself when I was hearing about it all those years ago, I always imagined that the cyborg would be a pretty brunette lady. You know, like how Bunny is seen as pretty by other Mobians. She could look like one of the typical popular girls in a high school show, with long hair and a pink tank top. The cyborg could have looked like a human and it'd be a better design than whatever this is. I can't imagine why anyone would defend a design like this seriously. I'm sure there's an in-universe explanation for the eyes. Like Eggman wants him to look scary. But that just makes me hate Eggman even more and still doesn't justify the green fur. If a character looks so distractingly off-putting that severely impacts my motivation to make a review, and I rant for paragraphs about it, they have failed. At least if this was colorless like Other M, I wouldn't be as miserable about it because the characters wouldn't look green for no good reason. I think the only main Sonic game character who looks nothing like the species he's representing would be Espio, but you can get used to his weird design after a while. And he's based off an ugly animal that would look too off-putting for a hero if it looked realistic. Bean's green, but Bean still looks like a duck and would no matter what color he was. So it's fine for him to be green. It depends on the animal's recognizability. It's sad because I'd already heard about this plot point of the reboot where there's someone only working for Eggman because their sibling needs the cybernetics to live and they'll be killed otherwise. And I used to take it completely seriously as a tragic, interesting idea. So it's great on paper. And I hoped they'd get a happy ending from that situation. Then I saw them. The artist completely sabotaged the effect that the writer was going for in me. I'm used to better. Ever since I started Archie, I said that I'm not going to talk about the art. This is one of the rare instances where art does matter. Usually Flint's stories at least let me stare at good art while I'm suffering through them. But this on top of everything else drives me to the brink. The story's infuriating here, while in Archie, it was usually interesting enough to make up for any art nitpicks. It's not like it's a whole story drawn by John Gray. But this is almost the Reboot's equivalent of it, where either way it makes the whole story tedious because I just want to forget about it. This is the easiest way to tell things have changed since Adiam, because just look at these two cyborgs together. There's a reason that Adiam didn't make Bunny have horrible cyborg eyes and have a weird color scheme. This isn't even fun to riff on because there's barely a plot to poke holes in.